Hello friends, and welcome to Gardening with Creekside. Today we are going to take a look back at the past year here at our Proven Winners Signature Garden at the Creekside Nursery in Dallas, North Carolina. So we're just going to kind of walk through and just reflect and look back at the progress that this garden has made in the last year, because we just completed its first full year in existence. And so we're going to take a look back. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, because tomorrow we're going to look ahead. We're going to talk about what are the future plans, what plants are we going to use, what is our vision, all of those fun things here at the Signature Garden. I will also go ahead and tell you that I may sound a little froggy. I have a little bit of a head cold, so just bear with me as we walk through this together. One more thing, because I know that y'all are going to notice that, those faithful viewers of ours, Brenna, our German Shepherd, she has a new accessory because she had to have a little procedure done at the vet this week. So she has on her donut so that she will not pull the stitches on her side. So she had a little cyst that had to be taken off. Everything is fine. She's doing great. It was an in and out procedure, so no problem. But yeah, so she's wearing a purple donut to keep her from pulling at those stitches. All right, so here we are at the Signature Garden here at Creekside Nursery. Like I said, we just completed our first full year of growing in the garden, and this is a garden that is open to the public. It is just right off of the garden center here. So when you come to visit us, you absolutely can come through and walk and enjoy this space. We created this space to really highlight as many proven winner plants as we possibly can, and to show you what it looks like real life gardening in the South. We are a zone 8A, North Carolina, with all the heat and the humidity. So that has been, that's a challenge for us, right? With the clay soil. So we want to highlight plants that really work well here in our climate here in the Southeast. Also, I am not a gardener that fusses over her plants. They really have to kind of like make it on their own. Yes, there is irrigation through this whole garden, but we have to do that just to keep everything looking pristine, and as well as we possibly can. So there is irrigation through here, but again, we do not do fussy plants around here. Ain't nobody got time for drama queens. So last year, January, we had our first flood of the year. We happen to have those semi-frequently, because here we are Creekside, and hence the name. This creek runs the entire length of the property, and typically it is a very sleepy little creek, but every once in a while when we get tons and tons of rain, it will overflow. When it flooded in January, it did no damage. It just looked really bad. We had tons of water flowing through here. It flowed through the shrub lot, and then we have it designed so that it will overflow here at the crossing of the creek. But we had no damage, just tons and tons of water. So with that, you have some erosion. So we did lose some mulch and some top dressing as far as like the compost, the organic matter. So we are always thinking about how can we add that back to our garden, because that is a problem. We get so much rain historically in the wintertime that it will just naturally kind of erode that compost, that great organic matter. So we're always thinking of amending the soil, putting that organic matter back into our red clay soil. And then, you know, fast forward to spring, and last year we did tulips in the garden. I learned a lot. We will talk about that tomorrow, about what we're doing this year. But we had beautiful tulips throughout the garden. So we have them in these raised beds, and then we had them in the 4 inner beds, the fountain, and then in the back. So as we go through the garden, the idea is that we always wanted, when we designed the garden, that this would be a space that can really highlight, give us some formality to this garden, because I typically tend to be a very whimsical, kind of a cottage garden style gardener, and we wanted this to be more of a formal space in the design of it and the look of it. So all the beds are very symmetrical. They are We used lines, string lines to create the beds. We measured it off. Everything is very balanced and very symmetrical. So we wanted to have that formal look with the whimsy and the fun of the garden. So like with the sprinter boxwoods, the idea is that the sprinters will grow together and become a hedge. They are getting there. They have grown a lot in the last year. And so we will prune them so that they form a hedge. This year, though, they were brand new, right? So we had the sprinter boxwoods brand new, and then our little lime punch hydrangeas. And we needed to fill that in. So that's what we use our annuals for. And so when we did our spring, summer planting, I went ahead and really filled that in, right? So once the tulips were gone, then here we come through for our spring planting. And for us in North Carolina, because of our heat and humidity, we need to get our summer annuals in as fast as we can, as early as we can, because their roots will get really well established and they just perform much better in the heat and the humidity of the summer. Even if you have irrigation, if you can get them in as early as possible, that is a huge benefit. So all my southern gardeners, the earlier you can get your annuals in the ground, the better it's going to be, especially if you don't have irrigation. We did the whole front this past year with the Supertunia Vista Jazzberry. So the entire front areas of this raised bed were nothing but the Vista Jazzberry, and it was stunning. That was the annual of the year from Proven Winners. Jerry and I got those in early. I mean, I think it was late March, early April, and so we planted that, and then I came back and I planted the front side of the beds. Because the shrubs were new, I really wanted to have a really full look, and so I did a mixed planting all the way here in the front of the beds, and they were very symmetrical. I came up with a pattern of, I don't remember how many plants it was, 7, 8, 9 different plants, and I came up with a pattern and just repeated that all the way through to bring some uniformity, but to really highlight lots of the beautiful Proven Winner annuals. On the corners, on each 4 of the corners, I did the ever popular, relatively brand new, the Superbena Pink Cashmere. Pink Cashmere, when we trialed it the year before, oh my gosh, I knew instantly it was going to be a fantastic verbena because it is very vigorous. It does these huge flower heads of this ombre with some white and some pink, and it is absolutely stunning. Very vigorous. If you're going to put it in a container, you need to be a big container, but it does really well in the landscape. So we highlighted that on the 4 corners, and then as we came through the front of the little lime punches, we had like the Golden Dreams Coleus. We had the Mystic Illusion Dahlia that was, oh my gosh, stunning. We did the Mini Vistas. We did Mini Vista Indigo. We did Mini Vista White. We had Saffron Finch in here. I had Plum Dandy, there's Cerveza and Lime, all sorts of different beautiful annuals that just filled in this entire area. Now, every year that we garden, we learn something new, right? That's what we do as gardeners. You take notice things of your messes and your successes. So I was using those annuals to really fill in this area and to give it lots of fullness, which it did while I was waiting for my shrubs to grow up. Moving on this year, my shrubs are getting bigger, so I will adjust my plantings here in the front. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But what was really fun that I knew, but I didn't. I would love to say that I exactly planned this, but I didn't, is as the annuals, like in the spring, in the early summer, your petunias are doing great, right? So they are just thriving. Maybe your coleus is coming along a little slower. The Mystic Illusion Dahlia was a little bit slower. And so everything was filling in. Then when we really got into the heat of the summer, the petunias started to kind of peter out. Last year, I don't know if it was because we would have tons of rain and then it would stop and it was back and forth, and they just had a little bit of a struggle time there at the end of the season. So we pulled those out, but the pink cashmere, the coleus, the dahlias, oh my gosh, they were doing fabulous. So even though we had the same plants in here throughout the season, the bed kind of changed as the season went on, which was really fun. So even if you came here in end of May, 1st of June, and then you came back in August, this flower bed looked completely different. So that was a lot of fun. We also have, like I talked about, the formality of the flower beds. So in the inside of the garden, we have these 4 beds, and then of course the fountain bed. These will always be annuals. So we will have them filled with annuals, and then the 4 outside beds are our shrubs and our perennials. You can see that we have taken care of the annual beds. They are filled with tulips. More about that tomorrow. But they are filled with tulips, and so now we are transitioning and working on putting to bed for the winter our gardens that have the perennials and the shrubs in them. So what we're doing is, obviously you got to come through and weed, right? So this bed has not been touched yet. So you're going to see weeds in here. You're going to see perennials that need to be pruned back. But the idea with these 4 flower beds, because they are on the perimeter, is that they complement each other, but they're not matchy-matchy. So what do I mean by that? I mean that I wanted to showcase, like I said earlier, as many proven winter plants as I possibly could and try to have some cohesion to the garden. Gardens are forever changing, but you want to have that cohesive look to it. So every flower bed has a hydrangea in it. Everyone has a summerific hibiscus. Each one has a baptisia. There are certain plants that do repeat. So everybody has the same Amsonia in them. They have the pink profusion salvia in them. So there is cohesiveness to the gardens, but there are differences. So like, for example, this flower bed, which is closest to the creek, does get the most sun throughout the day because just the way the tree line is, this gets the most intense sun all throughout the day. So what I have in here is my gardenias. They love it hot. And then I also have my Indian hawthorns. This is Levita moss. And so it is such a fun evergreen shrub. It is an Indian hawthorn. Sometimes that can be like a bad word here in the South. But this one is just so cool. It is petite. You can see the foliage on this is absolutely beautiful. It will do little tiny pink flowers in early spring. And it's not going to get massive, and it's more disease resistant. It does a really good job. So we have it here because it loves it hot as well. When I go to the other far corner, I have plants in there that maybe we're a little bit on the borderline of being too hot for. So they get in the afternoon shade first. So this is just how we kind of go through and look and see how can we adjust and plant differently. Of course, I'm all about some beautiful garden art. So we have these really fun, these are stained glass, they're called Feathers and Flowers. It is from the One-Eared Cow Art Gallery in Columbia, South Carolina. A lot of people will ask where they're from. You can check out their social medias, but really fun. So we added these in the early spring. So they are here. Each bed has different ones, but each bed does have some of the stained glass. So like in this bed, we have got the Serendipity, and you can see, right, Serendipity. We have got, this was the Incredible Blush. We have yet another Summerific Hibiscus. And so keeping that uniformity, and again, more of the Indian hawthorns are here on this side. So bringing that cohesiveness to the garden. As we go through, you know, as gardens develop, you're going to have messes and successes. We're going to have areas where, like, for example, over here in this far bed, I had I think it was Invincibelle Ruby hydrangea. I don't know. She suffered. She had a hard time and she did not make it. So I've got an empty hole right here now. So what I can do is I can come in and I can put something else there. Or if I figure out, you know what, everybody else is doing great, I'm just going to stick and maybe another perennial right here. Or if they're doing really well, just let them have room to grow. So gardens are always changing, right? Always evolving. Now, talking about fun evolving. So when we were designing the garden, I knew right away what I wanted to do around the fountain. This is a fountain from our friends at Unique Stone. Obviously, it's kind of taken apart right now for the winter time. We don't want it to freeze. But here at the fountain, I wanted to do a mass planting because I just think that would make a huge impact. So we had, the Super Petunia Vista Jazzberry on the front. So here, we did the new Super Petunia Hoopla Vivid Orchid. So you still had kind of that raspberry, plummy purple color, but it has the white edges. And of course, just mass planting all the way around the fountain so that either when you're coming into the garden, you see Jazzberry on the front, and then you see the Hoopla Vivid Orchid here. The drone shots did really well, and it was beautiful in those drone shots. So doing a mass planting here, we'll probably do that again I know we're going to do it again next year. Again, stay tuned. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But yeah, so right now, of course, it is filled with tons of tulips. Then on the 4 inner beds. Now this was one that this is a brand new garden for me, right? And designing it and thinking about it, it takes some time. Like I tend to be the gardener that has to, one, sit on things and think about it. But then on the other hand, I also have to make my decisions when the plants are actually here and my hands are on it and I see the plants, and then it kind of comes to me all at one time. I don't do really well, generally speaking, planning out my gardens like 6 months in advance, 8 months in advance. There are certain areas that I know, okay, I'm going to do this here or do this here. But when you're talking about a mixed bed like this, I just have to get my hands on it and just go for it. So that's what we did last year. At first, I was thinking that I would do different plantings in these beds that would kind of like the shrubs and the perennial beds, where they would complement each other. But then I was like, no, we need cohesiveness. So all 4 beds were planted the exact same. I was really pleased with how they came out. Learned some very valuable lessons the first time around. But what we did here was we had just tons of interest, right? So we had in here the purple fountain grass. We had the Senorita Rosalita Cleome. Every bed around the edge here behind the benches, we had the heart-to-heart caladiums. So you had this beautiful frame behind the benches of the heart-to-heart caladiums. We had this Bewitched Green with Envy sweet potato vine and lantana and salvia. And then along the back side, we had petunias there. I'm going to say that was Bermuda Beach. And then behind the caladiums here, we had one of the mini vistas in that deep, deep purple. So we had tons of interest, brought lots of beautiful height to the garden. And again, it's one of those that as your annuals, in late May, early June, the petunias were stunning, right? So you have different things that are gorgeous. The lantana, and we had the Blew My Mind of Ovulus on the corners. They were there, but they weren't super like showy. Fast forward to September, August, September, October, oh my gosh, that's when the grasses and the cleomes and the lantana and the evolvulus really started to explode because they love it hot. So even though you can have a mixed planting, just kind of think about that. What plants are going to be like an early spring bloomer? What plants are they can be there, it will be growing, but then they really start to shine later on in the heat and the humidity. So that's kind of what I'm thinking as I'm planting my garden, and that's where my thoughts are as I'm going through this coming year as we're getting ready to plant. What can I have in the early spring that really shines, and then maybe it comes back in the fall with the cooler temperatures? And then what's gonna be the showstopper in the heat and the humidity? Because heaven knows we have the heat and the humidity here. When we were planting the gardens, the idea is that yes, you have the formal garden here, but that we are going to expand gardens throughout this entire area. Basically, our property goes to the back where you can see there are some north poles back there. It goes beyond that, and then this entire hill up here is ours, and then it comes back down around. So the idea is over the coming years is that we're going to develop gardens throughout here. When we were designing the garden, officially in the beginning, it was going to end here. Like these were going to be the end. And then we started looking at it, and especially from the drone, and it didn't look quite balanced. So we did a little pivot and we installed this flower bed. And so again, they are the exact same size. They are in perfect alignment with all the other flower beds. and they are planted the exact same. So what we have here is viburnums, and these are the Glitters and Glows viburnums. The Glitters and Glows is a fun little creation from our friends at the Proven Winner Color Choice Shrubs in Spring Meadow. And so in here you have both the male and the female. So that way you don't have to worry about planting a male and a female. You're going to get flowers, you're going to get berries on them. They obviously are deciduous viburnums. You can see they're kind of holding on a little bit to their foliage. But really nice glossy dark green leaves, and they will get to be about 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. At maturity, they're going to come and they're going to kind of kiss each other. So we're going to really kind of fill in and have a beautiful hedge here of the viburnums. But in the meantime, while we're waiting on our shrubs to grow, what do? Well, that's where we use our annuals, right? Because keep in mind with your shrubs, the first year they the sun is really fun. The first year they sleep, the next year they creep, and the third year they leap. We did have growth on them, but it wasn't huge, it wasn't significant, so we use our annuals. I use Diamond Frost in here. Diamond Frost Euphorbia, I'm a huge fan of all the Euphorbias, and Diamond Frost will, it got to be about 12, 14 inches tall, very light, very airy, and just that nice white against the dark green of the viburnums was quite lovely and just filled in this entire area right here. As the viburnums grow, then we will do either smaller annuals and less number of the annuals because we really want them to grow and develop. And so tomorrow when we're talking about plans for this year and in the future, we'll talk about what we're going to plant here. We're going to talk about the pond because we do have this pond. Our pond, the pond has been here before the nursery has been here. It is a spring-fed pond. Underneath this holly tree right here is where the source of the spring is. And so this is a clay bottom pond. It is a natural pond. It's doing its thing. And so yes, we have a little bit of attention that needs to be done to it, but this is going to be a fun source of brand new gardens, really fun interest to it. So some people don't even know that we have a pond here because it just kind of fades away into the background and because it's very low obviously here. But yes, so we have the pond and we have some fun plans that we're going to be doing this year with that pond. Now, we also have here in the garden talking about expanding the gardens and thinking about how we're going to go out and push out. We have this little nook, and I had always called it like again, before the nursery was even here, it was always been my dream to like make these gardens, right? And so in my brain, don't ask me why, maybe it's because I'm a girl, maybe it's because I have 2 daughters, I don't know, but I always thought that this little nook right here, I always called it the wedding nook because I just thought it would be so cool for somebody to have a wedding right here, right? So bride and groom stand here, you have it all landscaped, you have chairs, that kind of thing. When we had our signature experience in late June, this is where we had everybody kind of gather and sit, and so it makes a really nice spot because in this morning it's in the shade and then it does get some afternoon sun. So this little area, bless its heart, it has definitely had its messes and successes this year. You can see that we have not come in yet and cleaned this area up. Just full disclosure, you can see the remnants, the leftovers of the Senorita Blanca Cleome. Y'all, if you're not growing either Senorita Rosalita or Senorita Blanca Cleome, you are missing out. These are the easiest plants that are showstoppers. They bring height to the garden. Your pollinators love them. They handle the heat and humidity like champions. Gorgeous, absolutely stunning. So we had planted the Senorita Blanca through here in an arch, right? So it goes all the way around, and it was just beautiful, absolutely stunning. Now, we did have some fun natural disasters this year. Again, if you're a follower of Creekside, you know that in late May we had massive flooding. It was a flash flood. There's nothing that we could do. There's nothing that we can do to prevent it. It is what it is. We literally have talked to engineers. There is nothing that we can do, right? So that is just a freak of nature. It is what it is. And we had a massive flash flood that came through here and took out about 40% of the shrub lot. Praise the Lord that the Signature Garden was well established, the grass was well established, and we didn't have any significant damage to the Signature Garden. It happened with the inventory there. And then, of course, I think most of you are aware that Hurricane Helene came through in September. And while we did not have the flooding with Helene, we did have, because the ground was so saturated and then the wind, we lost a couple of trees. And so no structural damage. It really, considering how North Carolina was affected by Helene, we were great. We did wonderful. We lost power for a couple of days, big whoop, everything worked out, we're fine. But the reason I'm telling you that is because one of those trees that we lost was this massive poplar right here. Huge. So when you look at this poplar tree, this is about the size of the poplar that we lost. It was a beautiful poplar, but it was in the little nook of the creek right here. And over years, it had started to get kind of washed out. And so the girls and I were actually down here. We were on the shrub lot when this thing fell. And it was just the wind, and it just fell, and it went all the way up to the creek right here. So we got a little bit of a mess. So Jackson and my daddy came through and were able to get the tree out. But you can see, I think, like we've got gaping holes because this was the entire root ball was right here. And you can see all these roots. I know that the shadows are not helping here. But the root ball was this entire area right here. And so when it fell, it just completely took all the roots and out. And we had this massive, huge hole here. Daddy and Jackson were able to get the tree out, but we left the main root system because we want that to help hold the creek. If we were to take out that root ball, we would lose a massive chunk right here. And there's no need. So we're just going to leave that there and maybe trim some of it back. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but this is going to be an area where we have to work on it. We had the Fairy Trail Bride hydrangeas planted in here, and while we still have 2 of them, we lost 2. They just got completely torn up from the root ball. And then super excited though is that this is the Aphrodite, so this is the Calycanthus, and y'all, when I say she held on by her chinny chin chin, she did. I mean, it just is right there. So she is doing well, so we'll have to come in here. We've got plans, we'll talk about that tomorrow. But kind of fix that a little bit. So yeah, it was a fun year as far as natural disasters. And then, that's gardening, right? So you're constantly dealing with something. Nature has a way of humbling the gardener. Last November of 2023, when we had just put the garden in, we put sod down, right? Because we have the fescue grass in North Carolina where we are. We can either do cool weather grass like fescue, which is what we have. That's why it's so pretty and green. Or you can do a hot weather grass like Bermuda, Zoysia, centipede, that kind of stuff. Jerry and I just prefer the fescue because you get this beautiful green year round. The only time that it may kind of struggle would be maybe end of July into August. So we put down the sod. It did really, really well. And then really kind of after the Signature experience, which was end of June, we started to notice that there was like wear and tear, especially in the front path right here and this little area right here. And life is crazy. You're not thinking. And we just were thinking, well, maybe it's just wear and tear like foot traffic, because this is the first year, we'll figure it out. And then all of a sudden it hit Jerry, because Jerry is a grass guy, like he knows grass. And he was like, oh my gosh, I think it's army worms. And so sure enough, he did the test where you mix up some Dawn dish detergent and you pour it in the soil. and all these worms, these caterpillars come up. So it was armyworms. So we had been infested with armyworms, it was a really bad year for armyworms. They start in the Gulf Coast and then they come up by a moth. And so the Gulf Coast had a really wet spring. So there was an abundance of this moth and it worked its way up. And so a ton of people, like it was on the news, it was all over the place about armyworms. So it completely devastated the garden. And this is a display garden. This is a public garden. We want it to be looking nice. And so we decided at that point, you know what, we're just going to resod it because that's the fastest way. And it was in the heat of the summer. When we reseed grass, you do that in the fall. So really it's like October into November kind of when you do that. And it was just going to be too much of a time delay. So we just decided, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and resod it. So we went ahead and resodded the entire garden everywhere. So all the way up into the interior garden where we had the sod before. And then we went ahead and extended it as well. So we also laid down the sod here on the corner and then brought it all the way up next to this flower bed, all the way along the tree line and then up and then even past a couple of feet past on the back side and then that whole area that we were just at along the creek. So we put that sod in. We had to keep the water on it, of course, because it is sod, and so you want to keep it nice and wet and damp. And so, so it did well. And we've talked about Chandler. Chandler is the fella that maintains our grass for us. So he does an amazing job. He cuts the grass, he edges, he does an amazing job. And so in the fall, came through and we reseeded, right? Because that's what you do with fescue. So you plug it, you aerate it, you literally put holes in the soil and it drops down the grass seed and the fertilizer. So everything up here was reseeded and then everything back there. So it just looks phenomenal. So this is all of Chandler's handiwork. He and Jerry are good buddies, and so they work very closely together, knowing about grass, and so they talk back and forth and come up with a plan. So between the sod and then reseeding in the fall, we had a great fall for grass, and so it looks really nice because we want this to be a very natural, cool area. At some point, maybe we would pave the inside, like not pave, but like with pavers or stone. The interior of the garden, but right now we just like having it grass. That's the thing about gardens, right? They always change and evolve. So right now everything is good. Some people have said, well, why don't you put down like decorative gravel? And y'all, if you've ever been around some small kids for more than 5 minutes where there is small decorative pea gravel, you probably know what they do. They love it. The gravel, whether it's the small decorative pea gravel or the big gravel in the drives, that is the #1 attractor for the kids that come here, which is great. But they love to kick it, they love to pick it up, they love to throw it. So it would be an absolute nightmare to maintain this garden with gravel paths because of it getting kicked and all the other stuff. So we're very happy with it right now. Like I said, at some point maybe we'll put pavers through here, but we are good with that. Now, the other new addition that happened this year in the Signature Garden was that we started developing more gardens. I had always wanted to have a garden in this spot right here because I don't know if the camera will kind of show it, but right now it is pretty wet, and this area, especially in the wintertime, is historically a very wet garden. We have natural springs all over the place, and there is one that kind of pops up kind of where the aquapot is in that area of the trees, and we can't find the exact source of it. And so, you know, why fight the wetness? Just embrace it. So we created this flower bed, called it Critter Corner because it's got all sorts of little unique stone critters in here. And I planted it, designed it with plants that really thrive really well in damp, moist areas. So we have got hibiscus, the summer-rithric hibiscus. I have got the Sugar Shack button bush. We have got some hydrangeas. We've got grasses, panicum grasses, we've got monarda, we've got all sorts of things, butterfly weed, the winterberries, the webmaster spiderwort. So all of these, this is literally a brand new bed here, and you can see we've done some things with it, but it's just kind of hanging out. Not much to do right now. I could come through and trim some of the perennials back, but overall, it is doing quite nicely. And so what I imagine is happening right now is that all my roots are being very happy, and they are growing and they are developing and they are spreading. So when we come through into the spring, into the summer, we're going to have my bottle rocket ligularia, one of them, is going to pop up. The hostas are going to explode. The pulmonaria, the ferns are just going to explode in here and be beautiful. So this is mostly a sun garden, except for this corner right here. We did do some shade perennials because of the way that the sun does, and with the hardwood trees that we have here, this gets some morning sun and then it is in the shade in the afternoon. So we did not have a problem with the hostas and the pulmonaria and the ferns. They did really well. This bed per se is not on irrigation because it stays historically wet so much of the year. There's not really a need for it. We do have a hose link at the barn, so if we do need to come over here and do a little supplemental water, which we had to do this year, right, because we had planted it for the first time, then yeah, we had to supplement it some, but overall that should not be a problem once these plants get really well established. So we're going to be doing more of these gardens throughout to kind of give you an idea of, all right, because here at Creekside we have everything. I've got wet areas, I've got dry areas, I've got full sun, I've got shade, you name it, we have got it here at Creekside. And so that's what's so fun about doing these gardens, is that we get to highlight plants that do really, really well here in the southeastern part of the United States, because it is challenging doing a garden in the South, right? If you don't have the heat and the humidity, it's kind of hard to understand what it's like living here in July and August. It can be quite miserable, but the payoff is, here we are at the beginning of the year. It's January. It is a gorgeous day. It's cool. It's not hot, but I'm not covered in snow. It is lovely. So there is a payoff. It's just in July and August, we just have a little bit of suffering that we have to go through. And then of course with the clay soil, right? We get people across the viewers of y'all that are, you look and you're like, did you Photoshop that? Like, is that your soil really that color? And we're like, yes, it really is. Looks like the surface of Mars sometimes on our soil. And so, growing plants in thick, compacted red clay soil, it has its challenges, but it can be done and you can be highly successful. So that's what our goal here at the gardens and with these videos is, to help you succeed, right? If you have those challenging conditions, we're here to help offer some free advice on how you can create beautiful gardens in your home so that you get to enjoy. So we certainly have enjoyed this space. It's hard to believe on one hand that it's only been 1 year, and then on the other hand, I'm like, it's only been 1 year. So we've come a long way in the last year. Certainly have had our messes and successes and have learned a lot, and we will continue to learn. So make sure you tune in tomorrow, because we're going to come back through and I'm going to share with you my plans for this year, because I think for me, this is one of the most fun times of the year, is when we are dreaming about next year. Next year's gardens, or rather, I guess now it's this year's gardens, right? You really can't get out there and do a ton, but you can start planning and dreaming. One of our sweet customers, viewers, he just lives, I don't know, 20 minutes away from us, Brian, he sent me a text yesterday and he was like, I've got my plans. I finally have it settled what my scheme is for the garden this year. So he had like this whole vision board. It's great. And so he had created this. So he's already has that plan. And then of course there's fun things that you always do last minute that you add in. But this is a great time to be dreaming about next year's gardens, planning. You can go ahead and start. If you're a local person, of course you can come see us, and or if you want to come visit us and come shop, because we have people that do that, of course. They bring their U-Haul, so just bring your U-Haul. Or as you come up with your plans, you go ahead and put your pre-order in. We'll send it to you. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And so tomorrow I'm going to share my plans. I don't have everything nailed down, but I have a lot of things nailed down. So I'm going to share those with you tomorrow. So let's have some fun and dream about the garden and warmer days and lush green days. As always, we so appreciate all of your love and support. Y'all have an amazing day. We'll see you in the next video. Bye, friends.